All right, so today we're diving deep into generative AI in education, all through the lens of this new UNESCO guidance. It's a hot topic, to say the
It
least.
really is.
So we're going to unpack what's important, especially for anyone out there who's a policymaker or an educator.
Yeah, and it's interesting. UNESCO, they're not hitting the panic button yet, not quite,
Okay.
but they're definitely concerned. I mean, they see the massive potential of Gen AI, obviously,
Right.
but they also recognize, all the risks if we don't use it responsibly, especially in education.
Which makes sense because it feels like every single day there's a new headline about AI, about ChatGPT, about all this, and it's easy to get lost in all that noise.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things that UNESCO really hammers home in this guidance is that it's not just about ChatGPT.
Right.
It's much bigger than that. There's a whole universe of these Gen AI tools.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Some write different kinds of text for you. Some create images. There's even AI that can compose music.
Wow. See, I had no idea it went that far beyond ChatGPT. So this isn't just some far-off future problem. It's already here.
Exactly.
Mm.
And that's why, UNESCO is saying we need clear guidelines now.
Right.
Like right now, we need to think about things like data privacy, bias in algorithms, the potential for misuse.
Especially with kids involved, right? I mean, that's a whole other can of worms. And speaking of which, the report brought up this term data poverty, which I'd never heard before.
Right.
What is that all about?
Yeah, it's a really important concept. So remember how GPT-3, the engine behind ChatGPT, was trained on this massive amount of data?
Yeah, I mean, mind-blowing amounts.
Thousands of gigabytes, right?
Yeah.
So data poverty, it's kind of like this. If the data used to train these AI tools is limited or biased, it's like teaching a child about the world using only one book.
Mm,
They'd miss out on so much.
right, of course.
And in the context of education, that can, perpetuate harmful stereotypes or limit students' understanding of the world.
So data poverty is about, like, who controls the information that shapes these AI systems, basically.
Precisely. And UNESCO, they're particularly concerned about the impact this will have on countries with limited access to technology and data.
Sure.
Imagine a world where all the AI tools we use in classrooms reflect only a single worldview.
Right.
That's a huge problem for education.
It's like those history textbooks that only tell one side of the story. You're never getting the full picture.
Exactly. And it gets even trickier when you start to consider how easy it is now to create these deepfakes.
Yeah, deepfakes. Those are seriously concerning. We've all seen the funny videos. But then you start to think about students, potentially using them to cheat.
It challenges the whole notion of academic integrity.
Yeah.
Imagine a student submitting, this piece of writing that seems incredibly well researched,
Right.
but it was actually just generated by AI,
Wow.
or even code for a computer science class.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do you even begin to detect that?
Right. And who owns the copyright for something an AI creates? It's a total minefield. So is UNESCO suggesting we just ban AI from schools altogether?
Well, that's the interesting part. They actually say the opposite.
Really?
Banning it isn't the answer.
Because it seems like that's a lot of people's kind of knee-jerk reaction, like, this is dangerous, keep it out of school.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But UNESCO's arguing that it's about finding the right way to use this technology.
Okay.
And they outline 7, key steps for governments and educators to consider.
Okay.
And it all starts with acknowledging that this is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And it needs to be handled really carefully.
So let's break down those 7 steps, because it sounds like that's really the heart of this guidance.
Okay.
Step 1 is endorsing strong data protection regulations, which
Right.
seems like a no-brainer.
It's absolutely fundamental, yeah.
Yeah.
But they go beyond just protecting, your personal data.
Yeah.
They highlight how important it is to also consider the content that AI is trained on,
Right.
especially copyrighted material.
Right. We can't have AI just, scraping data from the internet without considering, legal, ethical, all those implications.
That's exactly.
All right. So what's step 2?
So step 2 is all about the need for these national AI strategies.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
National AI strategies. I mean, it sounds kind of formal, right? Like
Wow.
something, and governments would have dusty reports about, sitting on a shelf somewhere.
Well, you're not wrong.
Mm.
But here's the thing. UNESCO found that while lots of countries are talking about AI in general,
Right.
very few actually have strategies that are specifically about generative AI in
Right.
education.
Oh, wow.
Because, we've got a plan for traffic lights, right? But then suddenly self-driving cars show up and nobody really knows what the rules of the road should be.
So we're kind of making this up as we go along. That's a little unnerving.
It is a fast-moving landscape, for
Yeah.
sure. But that's exactly why UNESCO is really urging action now. Like, these strategies, they need to be proactive. They need to address things like ethical use, protecting kids online, all of that.
Right.
Not just reacting after something goes wrong.
Which brings us to step 3, specific regulations on AI ethics. How do you even begin to regulate something as complex as, artificial intelligence?
It's a huge challenge, for sure. But UNESCO argues that it's not enough to just say, okay, AI should be ethical.
Right.
We have to define what that actually means in practice. Like, how do we prevent AI systems from perpetuating, all these biases that we already have in education?
Right.
How do we make sure that these tools are accessible to all learners,
Yeah.
regardless of, their background, their location, all of that?
Right, because it's not really a level playing field otherwise.
Exactly. And steps 4 and 5, they kind of dive even deeper into the specifics.
Okay.
So step 4 focuses on adjusting copyright laws for, this age of AI.
Yeah, because that's a whole other thing, right?
Yeah, totally. Like if a student uses Gen AI to create, I don't know, a piece of music
Right.
or write a poem, who owns the copyright?
Yeah.
These are questions we haven't really grappled with yet.
Right, because our existing laws were written before AI could even, create original works.
Exactly.
That's a whole new ballgame. And what about step 5, protecting children online?
Right.
I mean, that seems especially important given how easily kids can access these tools now.
Absolutely. UNESCO is calling for much stronger safeguards for children, like, age limits on chatbots
Right.
and other Gen AI tools. Because the argument is, kids, they might not have the critical thinking skills to really tell the difference between, AI-generated content
Yeah.
and something a human created.
Right.
And that's not even getting into the potential for misuse, right?
Yeah.
Like cyberbullying or spreading misinformation.
It's like we're giving someone this incredibly powerful tool without really teaching them how to use it safely.
Exactly.
Not a good idea. Okay. Step 6 is building capacity for using Gen AI in education. What does that actually mean, practically speaking?
So teacher training is a huge part of this.
Okay.
Teachers need to understand not just how to use these tools themselves,
Right.
but how to actually teach with them effectively.
Right.
It's about integrating generative AI into the curriculum in a way that really enhances learning,
Yes.
not replaces it.
Right, because the goal isn't to turn teachers into AI technicians or anything like that.
No.
It's about giving them the knowledge and skills to leverage this technology in a way that really benefits their students.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final step, which is arguably the most important.
Mm.
Reflecting on the long-term implications of Gen AI in education. This isn't a one-time fix, right? It's an ongoing conversation.
So it's not just about what we teach,
Right.
but how we teach in a world where AI is, becoming more sophisticated all the time.
Precisely. And UNESCO isn't just like leaving us with these big, weighty questions and that's it. They're actively working on solutions. Things like developing global guidelines for ethical AI in education and supporting teacher training programs around the world.
That's encouraging. It sounds like they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. But it's not just on them, right? I mean, what can parents, frankly, anyone listening do to be a part of this?
That's such an important point. UNESCO really emphasizes that this is a collective responsibility. Parents can start by, just learning about Gen AI themselves
Right.
and talking to their kids about it.
Sure.
We can all try to be more critical consumers of information online, right?
Yeah.
Questioning what we see, what we read, especially when it comes to, AI-generated content.
So cultivating like a healthy dose of skepticism,
Exactly.
not just blindly trusting whatever an AI tells us.
Exactly. And that goes for all of us, not just kids. We need to be thoughtful, about how we're integrating this technology into our lives, our education systems, everything.
It's almost like AI is forcing us to confront what it even means to be human, to think critically, to be creative.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
And it speaks to this potential of AI to not just, disrupt education, but to actually make it more human-centered.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here, but I want to circle back to something you said earlier about UNESCO walking the walk, not just talking the talk. You mentioned that they're developing actual tools and resources, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And they're making them freely available to everyone. For example, they created this platform called AI for Education.
Okay.
It gives you access to all this information about generative AI, ethical guidelines, case studies, teaching resources.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So educators could actually go online right now and find practical guidance on how to use these tools effectively in their classrooms.
Exactly. They've also developed a toolkit specifically for policymakers
Oh, wow.
that gives them guidance on developing these national AI strategies and regulations we were talking about.
Okay.
So they're really trying to equip everyone
Yeah.
with the knowledge and resources they need to navigate this whole new landscape.
It's like they're saying, we're all in this together. Let's figure it out.
Exactly. And they're not shying away from the tough questions either.
Yeah.
In fact, they're actively encouraging debate and discussion about the future of AI in education.
Which is refreshing because this isn't, a black and white issue.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of gray area. It's going to take a lot of different perspectives to really figure out the best way forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And UNESCO recognizes that. They're not pretending to have all the answers, but they are providing a framework for having these really important conversations.
So it's not about, like, dictating solutions from on high.
Right.
It's about starting a dialogue.
Exactly. And that's a crucial first step.
And speaking of first steps, UNESCO's guidance also delves into some really specific challenges that generative AI presents, in the classroom itself. One that stood out to me was the whole issue of assessment.
Oh, right. Because how do you fairly assess a student's learning when AI can potentially just do the work for them?
It's almost like we need to rethink what we're even assessing in the first place, right?
Yeah.
If AI can just spit out a perfectly structured essay,
Right.
does that mean we stop teaching essay writing? Or do we find new ways to evaluate a student's understanding? Like, how do we even approach that?
It's a huge question.
Ugh.
And it's one that UNESCO doesn't shy away from. In fact, their guidance suggests that we might need to, start moving away from these more traditional forms of assessment
Right.
that focus on just rote memorization or being able to, basically just spit back information.
Right.
Instead, we should focus on evaluating those skills that AI can't easily replicate.
Okay.
Things like critical thinking, creativity, problem solving. Those higher order skills.
So it's not just about what students know, but how they can actually apply that knowledge
Exactly.
in real world situations.
Yeah, and how they think critically about the information that they come across.
Right.
Whether it's coming from a human or from a machine.
Right.
UNESCO keeps emphasizing the need for these digital literacy skills
Okay.
so that students can, really navigate this world where they're going to be encountering AI-generated content everywhere.
It's like we need to teach kids to be like AI detectives, basically.
Yeah.
To be able to spot biases, to evaluate how credible something is, and just think for themselves.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that requires this kind of shift in mindset.
Yeah.
And not just for the students either.
Right, of course.
For educators as well.
Yeah, we have to adapt, too.
Exactly. We have to be okay with not having all the answers.
Right.
And kind of embrace the uncertainty that comes with all of this, this rapidly changing technology.
Which, let's be honest, can be kind of scary for educators, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're already juggling so much. How are we supposed to keep up with AI on top of everything else?
Right. It's definitely a challenge. But UNESCO, they see this as an opportunity for collaboration, too.
Okay.
They're encouraging governments to invest more in teacher training, in professional development,
Yeah, that makes sense.
to help teachers, feel more prepared, more confident, more competent
Right.
about using Gen AI in their classrooms.
So it's about empowering teachers, not trying to replace them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Teachers, they're still absolutely essential, but their roles, they may need to evolve a bit.
Right.
Instead of always being the primary source of information, they become more like facilitators, guiding students as they explore the world of AI, helping them to develop those critical thinking skills.
Yeah, it's a fundamental shift, but it feels like it might be a necessary one.
Yeah.
But this all makes me wonder about the even bigger picture here. Like, if AI is going to be this present in education going forward, what does it actually mean for the future of learning itself?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right.
And it's one that UNESCO really wants all of us to think about. Like, will classrooms even look the same in 10, 20 years?
Right.
Will we be able to personalize education in ways that we can't even imagine right now because of AI?
It's kind of exciting, but also a little bit daunting to think about.
It really is. And of course, there are valid concerns, right?
Absolutely.
About equity, about access. We have to make sure that Gen AI is actually benefiting all learners,
Right.
not just the ones who have the resources to access it in the first place.
Of course.
And this is something that UNESCO really hammers home throughout this whole guidance,
Right.
making sure this technology doesn't end up widening the inequalities that we already have.
It's like AI could be this amazing tool for, bridging the education gap, but only if we're really intentional about making it accessible for everyone.
Exactly. And that's going to take a global effort, honestly.
Right, this isn't something any one country can solve on its own.
Ex-
So I guess the big question is, for someone listening to all of this, maybe feeling a little overwhelmed by all the potential pitfalls, what gives you hope in all of this?
What gives me hope is that UNESCO isn't just like throwing up their hands and saying, look at all these problems.
Right.
They're offering a path forward.
Okay.
This guidance is a call to action
Mm.
for all of us, educators,
Yeah.
policymakers, parents, even the students themselves,
Yeah.
to really come together and shape the future of AI in education.
It's a good reminder that we're not just passive bystanders in all of this.
Right.
We actually have a say in how this technology is developed, how it's used,
Yes.
especially when it comes to something as important as education.
Absolutely. And the conversation's just beginning.
Yeah.
The more we talk about all of this, the better equipped we'll be to actually harness the power of AI for good
Right.
and hopefully create a future where education is more equitable, more engaging, and more empowering for everyone.
I love that. That's a fantastic note to end on. This UNESCO guidance, folks, is definitely a must-read for anyone who's invested in the future of learning.
I agree.
So dive in, explore these ideas, and most importantly, join the conversation.
Yes.
Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep asking those big questions.